Hello, English learners. Welcome back to the Level Up English podcast. Thank you very much for being back with me again. So good to be here. Today is another episode in our series looking at different English speaking countries from around the world. Today, we're looking at Ireland. I'm really excited to share this one with you. We covered so many good topics, which I will get to in just a second. Before we get to that, a quick shout out. I want to mention that, well, first of all, if you want to unlock the transcripts, so you can see all of the transcripts, basically the subtitles for every episode, including this one, you can go to levelupenglish.school/transcripts, and you can also click the link in the podcast description. So that's how you can get the transcript if you want to read everything while we're saying it. I also want to announce my group lessons. So these are group study lessons starting in June. These are 5 lessons altogether, and it's just £8 per lesson. So it's going to be a group of 5 lessons, 1 hour each, going through each week in June, maybe 1 week in July as well. And basically, it's going to be a chance for us to practice grammar, pronunciation, speaking, listening, reading, all of these skills that you need. We're going to be doing it all in these lessons. It's a completely new thing I'm doing, and I'm really excited about it. So if you're interested in joining, head over to ewmichael.com/group study. Again, I'll put a link in the show notes too. So that's what I wanted to shout out today, the transcript and my group lessons. If you have any more questions, just let me know. But I won't delay anymore because I want to introduce Ronan today. Ronan is an Irish English teacher who is now living in Canada. He goes by the name English on the Road online. Instagram is the same, English on the Road, and he's really nice to talk to. He's got a great sense of humor, a really good character, so I recommend checking him out over there, and I think you'll really like what he shares. And he also has a podcast as well, English on the Road podcast. So check that one out too. So Ronan joined me today to basically talk all about his home country of Ireland. He kind of cleared up some things that were confusing. In this episode, we talk about the language, the culture, the history, the relationship between Ireland and Britain, and we touch on travel at the end as well. If you want to travel, where should you go and when? I'm more than happy to admit that I don't know enough about this topic. These episodes are like a chance for me to learn as well, and you'll see I'm quite ignorant on many topics in this episode. So we're kind of learning together. So I hope you can enjoy this episode and join me on this learning experience. So thank you very much, and now let's have a talk with Ronan. Welcome to the Level Up English podcast, the best place to come to practice the English language, learn about the British accent and culture, with me, your host, Michael Lavers. Maybe could you start by telling us a bit about who you are and where you're from, all this kind of good stuff?
Sweet. So hello, everybody. My name is Ronan. I'm an English teacher from Ireland. I grew up in a town called Sligo. It's on the west coast, right by the ocean. It is gorgeous. Right now, I'm living in Canada, in Kelowna, British Columbia. And I moved out to Canada, about 6 years ago, about 5.5 years ago, I moved out to Canada. And so now I kind of just split my time between Ireland and Canada. And what do I love? I love mountains. I love nature. I love the ocean. I love coffee. I love teaching English. I love podcasting. Anything to do with people, I'm generally in favor of.
Perfect. You sound exactly like me, so that's great to hear. I love all those things too.
Perfect.
Excellent. I've never been to Canada before though. So how would you say like Canada compares to Ireland? Like how is it different? Is there anything you miss about home?
Oh, there's so much I miss. So much. The people and the humor are the big things I miss. Like in Ireland, we call it the crack, CRAIC. And that's kind of like the Irish humor. And it's unique to Ireland. You know, it's a lot of people might go to Ireland and maybe they would get offended because they think they're always getting made fun of or something like that. It's kind of hard to describe, but the humor we have is just so unique to Irish people that when you leave the country, it's like the first thing that you miss is the casual jokes, the casual humor, the dry humor almost in a way. Um, I mean, in similarities, they're both absolutely beautiful countries. You know, they're beautiful in their own ways, where Ireland is beautiful because it's green. We have rolling hills, we have the ocean, we have small mountains, mountains that I would have considered large back in the day, but after moving to Canada, I realized they're tiny, minute mountains. Canada is gigantic. It is massive. It's like to travel from one side of Canada to the other side will take you a couple of days, whereas in Ireland it takes you like 3 hours to drive the width of the country. And the mountains in Canada, like I said, are just ginormous compared to Ireland. And similarities and differences, there's so many we can go in, but humor, nature, all that stuff.
Excellent. I really want to go. I imagine there's such a sense of freedom there because, like, in England alone, there's so many places I want to visit, and so many places I haven't visited yet. And I kind of want to travel everywhere, and I can't decide where to go. And I imagine in Canada, it's much more amplified because it's just such a big country, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's like the difference between the East Coast and the West Coast is it's like two different countries. The cultures are so different, and like we're living in British Columbia, it's on the west coast of Canada, and it's seen as this more like relaxed hippie vibe,
Mm.
outdoors atmosphere. But you go to the East Coast, and it's more like the hustle and bustle area of Canada, especially in like the likes of Toronto. I mean, Toronto has 5 million people living there, which is the same population as Ireland, and it's just a concrete jungle. So it is it is like completely different. So if you were to visit and you're into everything that I'm into, I would say fly over the entire country and go west because that is where you would enjoy. That's where we got rainforest, you have desert, you have the mountains, you have the ocean, you have everything that you can dream of in the west coast. So
Okay, I will definitely do that then. That's a good tip. Um, so I've already mentioned it to you before, but I'll mention to the listeners now. The main reason that, or the main topic I want to discuss today is Ireland, because I'm kind of doing a
yeah.
series on, well, eventually all of the English speaking countries. So I want to kind of compare the language, accents, culture, all that kind of stuff. I thought it might be a fun series to do.
That's a really cool series to do.
Yeah. We've done Scotland so far. That was really interesting. I'm going to work my way around the British Isles and then maybe venture out to other places. Um, so maybe could you start by explaining, because it's very confusing. First of all, what's the difference between Ireland and Northern Ireland?
Mm-hmm.
Is it one country and all that kind of stuff? And also, where does Ireland fit into the British Isles? Very confusing topic for many people.
It is. It is definitely a confusing topic for a lot of people. So, Ireland is the name of my country, and it is a name that is in our constitution, and it refers to the 26 counties that are in what some people might call the Republic of Ireland. Okay. Then we have Northern Ireland, which is 6 counties that still belong to the United Kingdom. So they're in the UK, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Now, that's the political name of the two states, I guess. Some people will say, I'm from Ireland, and they might be referring to an area in Northern Ireland because they're referring to the island of Ireland. So that's where it also gets even more confusing. And other people might say, I'm from the Republic of Ireland, which of course would just refer to the 26 counties that are in what I would call Ireland. So already it is kind of confusing. I can absolutely see the confusion. But what you need to know is that if someone says they're from Ireland, like just on the street, that could refer to anywhere on the island of Ireland. If a politician says Ireland, generally speaking, they're only going to refer to the 26 counties that are also known as the Republic of Ireland. So that would be the names of the different states and areas in the country of on the island of Ireland, say.
Yeah. it is really confusing. I would say the best way to learn about it is like to just Google a picture. There's these really good pictures online where you can find like all the lines and the boundaries and the different names.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, just to be fully transparent, to the listeners now, even people in the British Isles don't always know, because I made the mistake of saying, I'm looking to kind of interview people from different parts of the UK when I first contacted Ronan, and then he corrected me kindly. And yeah, it's not part of the UK, is it? So it's part of the British Isles, but not part of the UK, nor is it part of Britain, right?
No, it is 100% free from Britain. It used to be part of Great Britain, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. So Great Britain would refer to England, Scotland, Wales. The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is obviously the entire one. And that used to be called the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. That's what it used to be called back in the day before we got independence. And in fact, even the term British Isles is something that we don't use anymore at all. It's actually kind of gone away completely. And so much so that I think it was in 2011, maybe, the Department of Foreign Affairs in Ireland officially said that we're not going to use that term anymore because it implies that we're still part of Britain. So what we might actually say would be the Irish Isles or the Northern Isles or something like that. We wouldn't use the word British because it just automatically assumes that the island of Ireland is included in that area. Or if we say British Isles, we would be referring to Britain, but not Ireland, so to speak. So that's an
I
interesting
didn't
one
know
as
that.
well.
That's interesting. So you said when you refer to the entire island group, you would say maybe Northern Isles or something like that.
I would probably say the Irish and British Isles at this
Ah,
stage.
okay. That's good to know. I don't want to
Yeah.
potentially offend anyone from Ireland, so that's
Oh,
good
don't
to know.
worry. A lot of people don't know this, and it is an issue that's coming up more and more now, especially because of Brexit and everything like that. But for me, I wouldn't generally say the British Isles. I know geographically it was used a long time ago, but nowadays, in terms of when people say it, it would just assume and give the idea that Britain controls the Isles entirely, which is not the case anymore.
Mm. Yeah, very confusing, but yeah, good to know. I think it does clear
Yeah.
up some confusion. So what would you say? I know this is a huge topic, but you don't have to go into too much detail. Do you know anything about the relationship between Ireland and England, or Ireland and Britain? How is it
Yeah.
from your point of view?
Oh man, I know a lot about it. So I actually graduated university as a history teacher because I've always been fascinated with history.
Excellent.
I love history. My mother is from Northern Ireland, and she grew up in County Down, which is just across the border in on the island of Ireland. So, I mean, I would have gone up there to Northern Ireland an awful lot as a child. You know, compared to a lot of my neighbors, a lot of my friends who've never gone up there at all, I would have had a lot more experience. I've only ever been to England, what, like, I've passed through London Heathrow Airport a few times, and I went to a scout camp one time as well outside London, and that was years ago. So I've never really been to England or any. I've been to Wales. That's the closest I've come to it, I guess. But in terms of the relationship, it's sound. There's no issues. The only issue would be with the British government. But I mean,
Mm.
you can hardly blame the average British or English person for what their government does, because you know it's not a fair representation or anything like that. It's just never going to be that way. So English and Irish people do have a lot of similarities. There's an awful lot of differences, but the relationship is fine. And like I have so many friends who have lived in the UK, have made lives in the UK. I have so many friends from the UK who have moved to Ireland and have lived there and made lives and everything. And there's no issues at all. So overall, the relationship is sound.
Sound meaning good, fine.
Good.
Yeah,
Yes. Sound meaning good.
yeah, that's a good word. Um, yeah, I would say that's true for really most places around the world, right? You can have your problems of different governments, but then the individual people, yeah, usually it's okay. So I think
It
that's
wasn't
good.
always like that. I mean,
Hmm.
in the past, there was issues. There was a lot of racism towards Irish people in England. And I know I just said I have friends who've made lives in England and have done well, but they have told us about instances of racism in the UK towards them for being Irish. So maybe it's casual jokes, or maybe it's just people don't want to talk to them and everything. And that is the reality of the situation. But that wouldn't be, you couldn't say that's true for every single person who lives in England or every person who's from the UK. As far as I'm concerned, I'd love to believe that's just a minority and a very silly part of the population.
Yeah, you'd hope so. Yeah. I mean, from my point of view, I haven't seen anything like that before. You know, I've met quite a few Irish people in England,
Mhm.
and they seem. I mean, oh yeah, obviously you don't see them any differently. Of course, they're well liked, and the one time it might come up is just like, wow, your accent is so cool. Wow, say something for me. Like, but that's about the extent of it. But yeah, you mentioned your history teacher. That's really cool. I love history as well. I don't know much, admittedly, about the history of even the British Isles. I don't, or should I say Irish and British Isles, right? Um, I don't know much about it. I've only been kind of looking into it more in the past couple of years. Is there any kind of really important story or kind of interesting facts that you think would be interesting to share today? I know it's a huge topic again.
Oh, there's so much. I mean, um, put it like this: the very, very first female member of parliament in the UK was from County Sligo, which is the town I'm from, and her name was Countess Markovich.
Mm.
And she was the very first woman ever elected. She didn't take up her seat because she's was Irish and we were fighting for independence at the time. But she, very, very interesting character from Irish history, very important person in Irish history. So that's obviously a big one. Um, I mean, overall, like Irish history, similar to English history, goes back years. And I mean, just recently in the very southern tip of Ireland, they found an old burial tomb, and there was some tools there that predate anything. So now the history of Ireland has been pushed back even further by another 7,000 years or something like
Wow.
that. So I mean, it is such a vast topic. You know, it's such a long history. It's hard to just nail down one thing in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm so fascinated by that, like the really ancient history. You know, where I'm from
Mm.
in Cornwall, we have like all these like ancient burial grounds that are maybe 1,000 years old or 2,000 years old, and it's so fascinating just to think of these people living that long ago.
And then it's also fascinating to think, how did they build these structures? And like, you know, you have Stonehenge, we have Newgrange.
Yeah,
Even in my hometown, there's these passage tombs that were built, but these rocks that they put on top of each other, these boulders, are hundreds of tons maybe. And it's like, how on earth did a community lift this on top of it to align with the sun as well? Like, that's the crazy part.
yeah. I think it just comes to show that we really do underestimate the maybe the intelligence of people back then. We kind of think they were kind of almost like animals, but obviously they were making these complex calendars like Stonehenge, right? That, you know, not only show the physical strength but also the mental ability. But yeah,
Yeah.
really cool. Yeah. Um, I want to touch on the history a bit for one more, but yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know enough about it to really ask more
So,
specific
like, what
questions.
aspect would you like to learn a little bit about? Give me something to
Well,
talk about.
the one area I have heard about, which is not taught in schools, at least when I was in school, sadly, but I heard about potato famine and a
Mhm.
little bit about that, or the basics, and yeah, Irish independence, I
So,
guess,
what
right?
what what do you know about the famine?
Um, really, really nothing. I'm quite happy to admit my ignorance now. um, really not much. It's other than there was a famine, and I think potatoes were the one thing that. Wait, no, I'm not even going to guess. I don't know.
Okay, so there was a famine, and what is a famine?
Famine is when food cannot grow or there is no access to food for a period of time.
Yeah, so a famine is when there's a lack of food for a country or for a population. And in Ireland, it has been known as the Great Potato Famine. And I just did inverted commas for those people who are listening because it definitely wasn't a potato famine. Yes, the potatoes ceased to grow due to blight being a disease that went all over Europe. And yes, potatoes were the main staple food for the native Irish. However, it was also the amount of food that was exported from Ireland during that time. So I and many other people would go as far to say it was an act of attempted genocide by the UK government against the
Mm.
Irish people, because there was more than enough food to feed Irish people in Ireland, but it was being exported to England. It was being exported to other parts of the world. Other countries wanted to donate food to Ireland at the time, but the Queen and the British government wouldn't really allow that to happen. They would prevent that from happening. Ireland actually did receive a donation from the Choctaw Nation, the Native Americans, of
Wow.
I can't exactly remember how much it was, but it was just a case that they were sending what they could. So, I mean, this was a well known thing that the food was being taken out of Ireland. And I just have some, my friend actually sent me some messages about it the other day. And in 1845 in Ireland, 3,251,907 quarters of corn were exported from Ireland to Britain. So we
Wow.
produce a lot of corn, but that was exported. The same year, 200,000, 200,000 and 257,257 sheep were exported to Britain. In 1846, 480,000 swine and 186,000 oxen were exported to Britain. A wide variety of commodities left Ireland during 1847, including peas, beans, onions, rabbits, salmon, oysters, herring, lard, honey, tongues, animal skins, rags, shoes, soap, glue, and seed. And almost 4,000 vessels carried food from Ireland to the ports of Bristol, Glasgow, Liverpool, London during 1847, which we call Black 47, because that was the year when the most people died and the
Mm.
most people emigrated. So much so that even today, we still haven't reached pre-famine numbers of population.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And so it is an interesting thing that recently Irish Joe Biden, you know, the way he calls himself that, he said that his family left Ireland because of the British. A few years before that, Paul Ryan, a Republican in the US, said his family left because the potato failed. And I think that sums up the way history has been treated, where you have on the one hand Paul Ryan who's like, oh, it's all because potatoes failed. But then you have Joe Biden, who is more realist and has probably actually researched it and was like, wasn't just because potatoes, it was because the food was literally taken from the hands of the Irish people and exported to Britain. So that's a huge one there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That so the extent that I knew about it was that, you know, Britain had done some pretty bad things to Ireland, and I guess that was one of them, right? So did that contribute? I guess that must have had a big contributing factor to the independence, which happened a bit later,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, so that was in 1846, 1847. I actually went on for about 3 years. And then it was, that absolutely did fuel independence. And at the same time, Catholic emancipation was a big factor. Catholic emancipation being that in Ireland, if you were Catholic, you weren't able to own land worth a certain amount. You weren't able to have a horse worth a certain amount of money. You weren't allowed to have a gun. There was all these rules placed against Catholics, basically all the native Irish population, because at that stage England wasn't Catholic. You know, at that stage Ireland was Catholic, but Britain wasn't Catholic. And so from 1847 right up to 1916 there would have been some rebellions, but 1916 was the big gigantic rebellion that really kicked off the last war of independence, the one that finally became successful. And yes, the famine would have been used as almost like propaganda to just remind people why we deserve to have our own country, and why, like, what's also really interesting about the famine and everything else is like that's what Britain did to its own people. Like, people in Ireland were British at the time,
Hmm.
and Britain starved them and took food from them. So Irish people were kind of like, why are we being part of Britain when they don't show us any respect, when we don't have the same rights as other British citizens? And that was a really motivating factor. It's kind of like, for a long time, Ireland only wanted its own parliament in Dublin to control the affairs of Ireland and let the British government control international affairs. That's what was really wanted. And it was in 1801 when the Act of Union happened, which took Ireland's parliament away. So in 1801, Ireland's parliament was dissolved and Irish affairs were controlled from Westminster and London. After that, up until about 1916, there was more of a push to get home rule, where we'd have our own government in Ireland to control Irish affairs. That kept failing. That was like a carrot and the stick. Britain kept promising, "Oh, you'll get it, you'll get it, you'll get it," and eventually got to the breaking point where home rule wasn't enough, and full 100% independence was what we wanted and got.
Okay. That puts it all into perspective then. Yeah, I mean, I kind of selfishly love these kind of episodes because I'm learning so much as well. So it's really interesting. What I probably would say to, maybe we could move on now, but maybe if the listeners do want to kind of learn more about a specific topic, they can, I don't know, come check out your page if you talk about it, or
check
maybe,
out the page.
Yeah.
Sorry, what you're going to say? Or
No, yeah, go ahead, check out the page.
I would say take responsibility for your own learning.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge message. And this is no disrespect to you or to anyone else, but there is a severe lack of knowledge of history between our countries, a severe lack of knowledge from the English educational system and the way. I mean, how much do you know about England's colonization of the world and the crimes committed against people around the world time and time again? And it's like, these are the things that people should know about, even in England, in your own country. Every country and every citizen should know the good and the bad of their own history.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I was going to mention that too, that it might come to surprise to many people, but I wasn't taught anything about the British Empire in school. Like throughout my entire school, even like GCSEs, I never did that. So I really don't know much about it, to answer your maybe rhetorical question. So yeah, I'm kind of actively trying to learn more about it these days and some of the horrible things we did in the past. But yeah, it's definitely a good idea to look into it, and I'll be doing that too. What I was going to say as well is, if people do want to hear more about it and you were happy to, we could do like a part 2 episode sometime in the future.
I'd love to.
Yeah, maybe delve into more specific topic.
100%.
Cool. Let's move on to language now. See, my favorite part generally. So first of all, start with the basics. Does Ireland have a language?
Yes, we have 2 languages. We have Irish, or Gaeilge, and we have Hiberno English. So
what can you tell me about them? I haven't heard of the second one, to be honest. Is there any connection to English? Are they very different? Do they have a different history?
They have so first we have Irish, Irish being the native language, or Gaeilge as it's called in it. And that is a completely separate language to English. It is not related at all. I mean, if you speak English and you speak to someone who is speaking Irish, it is 2 polar opposite languages. That is the language that we had for a very long time in Ireland, but it died out due to many issues, including colonization. And the famine was actually one of the final nails in the coffin, I guess, because so many Irish people were leaving the country. And if you were to go to Australia, if you were to go to England, if you were to go to, say, the United States, and you only spoke Irish, you wouldn't get very far. So English kind of became the main language for a variety of reasons, including that. Irish is something that we learn in school, but unfortunately, the way it's taught is not very efficient. Like, we learn it for 40 minutes a day, for 5 days a week, for 20 weeks a year or something. So, I mean, it's no wonder that we're not able to speak it fluently. But if you go to Ireland, every sign has English and Irish. If you go to a government office, everything is in the 2 languages. And if you want to do any business in government through Irish, you 100% can. So
interesting.
And actually, in certain parts of the country, it would be the first language still. So in the very west of the country, there's some islands and there's some small communities where you might have people who grew up only speaking Irish and speak English as an additional language, and same in the southern parts of the country.
Very cool, very cool. So, just in case anyone is thinking about traveling to Ireland in the future, do you think that it's ever necessary to learn some kind of the Irish phrases or anything like that, or is English always okay?
English is going to be fine. I mean, like when you go to these rural, small communities, I mean, they wouldn't really expect you to have Gaelga or Irish or something like that. I mean, it would be nice for you to try. It would be very nice for you to say Giagwitch or something, and have the very, very small basics of it, but there's no way you'd ever go into a full conversation in it.
Yeah, it makes sense. What was that word you said? Was that good morning or something?
Giagwitch, it means hello.
Hello. Oh, nice, nice.
And then slán is
Slán.
goodbye. Yeah.
Okay, I'll see if I can remember that for the end of the podcast. Let's see,
Do
slán.
it.
Okay, very cool, very cool. Yeah, I've been learning Cornish recently. Do you know anything about Cornish?
I know that Cornwall is very different to the rest of the UK, and that like a lot of people might identify as Corns faster than they might identify as English or UK citizens. Is that correct?
I think so. I think generally people are much happier to identify as Cornish, Welsh, or anything rather than the big place. But yeah, Cornwall is of course part of England, but people prefer quite often to be Cornish.
Yeah.
People are quite proud there. But I've been learning the language, and it's very similar to Welsh language. It's really fascinating. So I like to hear like different aspects of the languages of our islands here.
And how do you learn it? Like, if I go to Cornwall, would I hear people speaking it in the streets?
No way, no way. So it sounds, you said there's still some people that have, Irish as a first language, which I think is really cool. But in Cornwall, no one does. It's only second language.
Okay.
And it is on signs in most places around Cornwall, like in Ireland. It's starting to be taught more in schools these days, but you have to go like very far west and maybe talk to some old people to find it. But most people wouldn't really know anything.
Yeah, that's interesting because I mean there is a revival for Irish now, and
yeah.
I mean as soon as I'm finished my studies, like I'm in university, as soon as I'm finished that, Irish is the language I want to learn, and that's the first one I want to learn, Irish and Spanish. And I feel that I would have a good grasp of the Irish language. Like I do speak, I do have it in my head, and I always loved it when I was growing up. I love speaking it and everything. So it won't take me long to get back into the zone of learning Irish again. And the benefit of it is it's like a secret language. So when you travel, and if you want to say something to one of your friends who's also Irish, like no one around you can understand a word. So it's nice.
That's awesome. I was going to ask you about like why. So obviously that's a good reason, but I don't think that's enough, obviously, to learn a language.
No.
So why are you interested in learning Irish then? What's your motivation?
It's my identity. It's my country. It's my language. It is the language that people died for in the past. It's the language that was oppressed. It's the language that is truly beautiful and more descriptive than English. Like the way words are used is a lot more poetic and a lot more, like I said, descriptive. So an example would be vegetarian. A vegetarian is a person who doesn't eat meat, but in Irish it would be Bel Shantor or something like that, which means like meat shunner. So it's kind of like the person who shuns meat, and it's just something that I've always been attracted to it because I'm Irish, and yeah, it's my culture. So that's why I really want to learn it.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I think, when I was younger, like when I was a teenager, I kind of thought, what's the point of being proud of where you're from? We're all humans. We should be proud of, the world rather than the country. And now that I'm kind of getting a bit older, I'm kind of not, I'm kind of seeing it a bit differently, that I think it's good to be proud of where you're from, but not exclusively. Kind of like embrace the culture, embrace the history, but also don't get overly patriotic, like some kind of balance.
Well, you can be a patriot and not be a nationalist, and there's a big difference where it's like a patriot wants what's best for their country and they can admit when their country is wrong. A nationalist has the blinders on where it's like, my country's the best no matter what. And that's not true. That's not a good way to go about it.
And I'm sure you're probably seeing, or you probably would agree that learning the language will kind of give you a deeper insight into the history as well and
Yeah,
some of the culture. Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, learning a language. I mean, you need to learn the culture as well as the language. You know, it's like you can read a book and learn a language, but until you like go there and experience it and use it and get immersed by it and everything, you're not going to appreciate it as much. So it's like next time I go back to Ireland after COVID, I would love to be able to go to one of these areas that only speak Irish and stay there for a month or 2 months or something and just learn it and get immersed in it and surround myself with it.
Yeah.
But that also means surrounding yourself with the Irish culture, with the music, with the food, with the humor, with the crack, with everything, and the ceilidhs, the dances, everything like that is Irish culture.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So how about maybe before we move on from languages, many people listening, or many of my students, let's say, mention Irish accent and they mention how difficult it is to hear. And I think it's important to expose yourself to it as a learner because it is, there are many Irish people, of course. It's a very common accent or accents, maybe I should say. So what what would you say like some of the big differences between what we can call like RP English, what people might say standard English, and Irish accents?
So, I mean, in Ireland, there's like any country in the world, but any language, there's different dialects and there's different accents. And what I mean by dialects, I mean there's different words that we use. And when you go to Ireland, there will be different words compared to, say, England or the US or Australia or somewhere like that. In terms of accents, I mean, yeah, you go to north, you go to south, east, and west. There's all different accents. And I mean, it would be a good challenge for a person to go to, I'd say, rural Ireland, to go there and talk to an elderly person and try to understand their accent, or talk to a farmer. And then after that, go to inner city Dublin, where the accent is completely different and everything. So, I mean, it is different. It's going to be faster in some areas, it's going to be a lot slower in other areas, but similar to anywhere you go. I mean, accents vary, but I would say to students would be, if you want to learn or you want to listen to the Irish accent, just listen, watch some Irish TV shows, listen to Irish radio, for example. They're the best ones. Like any talk show that you can listen to where they get people from around the country just to call in and give their opinions or something, that's the way to really try to identify the Irish accent and the differences.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. So just, yeah, exposure, practice, that kind of stuff. Um, and yeah, I always say to my students as well that it it is difficult for people like me as well. So don't feel bad if you don't quite get it or it's
Oh
frustrating
yeah.
because I'm a very kind of sheltered Southern English boy, I guess, or not boy anymore. But even if I just go to Manchester, north of England or something like that, I sometimes have a hard time understanding people. So I always think it's important to put out there that just because you don't understand completely doesn't mean you're like a bad
Oh my
English
God, a
learner, does
hundred
it?
percent. I mean, like, there's times that, like, if I was talking to someone from, like I mentioned, like a rural Irish farmer, I would have to be listening so attentively because it's like, it sounds like a different language at times. And the grammar structure will be completely different to someone from the city, for example. You know, it is going to be different. And we use a lot of idioms, a lot of expressions and stuff. And they're things that you won't understand, but you'll get the gist of it, you know. But
Mhm.
I would never say like be upset because you don't understand the accent, because like let me tell you that if an American goes to Ireland, they will have a hard time keeping up with a conversation. Even Canadians here, like if myself and my girlfriend are talking, or myself and like one or two of my other Irish friends are talking in a natural pace that we always talk, we would look over at our Canadian friends and they'd be like, I don't understand what you guys are talking about. They don't get the conversation because the speed that we talk about, the way we might mumble our words at times, because that's just how we talk sometimes and everything, and we understand it. And when I do talk to Canadians, I do change my voice sometimes. I articulate more, for
Mhm.
example, something like that. So
Yeah. What I love, and I find it really funny, is I see it a lot on like American TV shows where there's like a English guy or it could be Irish guy or something like that, and they have to put subtitles underneath because Americans wouldn't understand. But
Oh my God, absolutely. But then it would be the same for us going to Southern America or
yeah, yeah,
somewhere
yeah.
like that. Like I wouldn't get what they're saying at all.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. So you mentioned the word crack earlier, which is a
Yes.
nice word. Besides that one, do you have any more like cool slang terms or cool Irish terms, local phrases?
All right. So if I say to you, the weather is grand, what does that mean for you? Grand.
To me, I haven't heard that from Irish person before, but to me it sounds like kind of a bit posh, like grand is like splendid, excellent.
All right. For me, it's average. It's normal.
Interesting. Okay.
So if I say, oh, it's a grand day, it's not beautiful, it's not terrible, it's in the middle. That movie was grand. It was okay. It wasn't fantastic. I mean, it wasn't bad. It's not going to win an Oscar. It was grand. That's what that means for us. So if you're in Ireland, Michael, and someone says, and if you say to someone, how are you? And they say grand, don't get excited because they're not extremely happy. They're level. They're indifferent right now. So
That's so useful to know. Okay, so grand in England, I should say, very, very good. Grand in Ireland, yeah, so, right?
it's average, nothing special.
Wow, that's so good to know. Does that come from English or is that a separate word, do you think?
I couldn't tell you. I have
Hmm.
no idea. I am clueless about that one.
Wow,
So
cool. That's a good one. I like it. I like it.
yeah. Another one would be this is a funny one actually that I was just home in Ireland recently and we were talking about languages and different ways to say things. So the verb shift, Shift. What does that mean for you?
Like to change something or move, right?
Mm-hmm. And does it have any other meanings apart from that?
As a verb,
Yeah.
I don't think so. Not that I can think of.
And do you have a noun, the shift?
The shift. No, shift as a noun to me means like your work shift, like the time you spend at work.
Mm-hmm. So shift for us has obviously those meanings. That's one. But another meaning that we have is to make out with someone, to kiss someone. And
Oh,
so if you're a kid, it's kind of like you want to shift that person over there. And that means you want to kiss that person over there. And
okay.
then the shift would be like a childish way of saying, oh, did you kiss that person? Did you get the shift last night, for example? So
Nice. To me, it just sounds like you're kind of like moving them. Hey, he's gonna shift her. He's gonna move her over there. So, oh,
so that's a funny one. The shift and shift as a verb means just to make out or kiss somebody. Now it's not like it's more like a childish one or an
mhm.
adolescent version of it or something like that. But that's
Is
one that's
it?
definitely unique.
Would it be a little bit like snog? Like snog
Yeah.
is not something that adults would really say. I think, right? But
Yeah,
it's
we
same
wouldn't.
meaning.
Yeah, and snog would definitely be the British version. And if someone says snog in Ireland, everyone's gonna be like, "What are you saying that
Oh,
for?
okay. So
It's
that.
shift."
Okay, that's not international English then.
No,
Okay.
no.
It's
Snog is
not.
a very, very British term.
See, it's hard to know. Some people ask me like, "Is that a British word?" And I don't really know. I haven't ever been to another English-speaking country before, so
Because
I
in the
really should.
US, they'd say make out. In Ireland, we'd say shift or to kiss or something like that. There's different variations around the country. And in England, it's always been known as a snog. So,
Okay, so anyone who is single and traveling to our countries, those are good words to know.
yes, indeed.
Use them carefully. Okay, maybe the last thing we can touch on. I've still got so many questions, but probably not enough time today. But travel. I'm
Mhm.
thinking that there's going to be listeners wanting to travel there, and me as well. I was actually planning on doing it, um, probably, well, right before the coronavirus, but obviously something happened. I couldn't. So, would you have any like travel tips? Like, where should you go? What time of year? That kind of stuff.
So, if you travel to Ireland, you're probably going to fly into Dublin Airport. And as soon as you do, get on a bus or a train and leave Dublin. That's my first bit of advice. You know, Dublin is an international city. It is a standard city. Yes, there's a lot of history. There is the Book of Kells, there's Trinity College, and all of that stuff there. But for me, real Ireland is when you leave the city, and real Ireland will be rural Ireland. So, like, I'd always recommend people to go west and to get on the bus and go to Galway. And that's a nice town to base yourself in. And from Galway, you could either travel further south or further north. I would say to anyone who's listening that wants to travel Ireland, just look up the Wild Atlantic Way. So that's kind of like a program that has started in recent years in Ireland. And it's just like a path that goes down the length of the country on the west coast. And you can actually cycle it, and it goes from the north all the way down to the south along the west. And once you go out west, it's kind of like, as far as I'm concerned, it's like real Ireland. You know, that's what I would call real Ireland. Now, the same with parts to the south, obviously, but just not Dublin. And it's like you can find your quiet bars there, your small bars there. You can find music being played on the streets there. You have that in Dublin too, but it's just a little more commercialized as far as I'm concerned. Um, in the west, then you obviously can go surfing. You know, you can go hiking there. You can go to the highest sea cliffs in Europe. You can go to the cliffs of Moher. You can go to Connemara, which is just this beautiful bogland with stone walls everywhere like that. So for me, the first thing you do is get out of the city. That's the first thing. And then from there, enjoy it. In terms of times of year, I mean, hopefully it'll be less rainy in the summer, but always bring an umbrella because it's going to rain no matter what.
Yeah, be prepared. I guess the weather's similar for me too, like wherever you are here, and it's quite changeable, isn't it? You can't predict
Oh God, man, like even just being home recently and comparing it to where I am now in Canada, it's like if the weather in Canada is nice in the morning, it's going to be nice in the evening, unless you're high up in the mountains. But in Ireland, it changes every 5 minutes. I mean, it took me a while to get used to it. And it's like you're out walking and like you put your rain jacket on and you take it off because it gets sunny, and then suddenly it gets cloudy again and windy and stuff, but it's beautiful. But one thing I will say, if people really want to experience Ireland and Irishness, go to the Fleadh, Fleadh. And that is an Irish cultural festival. And it's held in a different part of the country every year. And it's basically just like Irish culture and music on the streets for a period of 2 weeks. And it is by far the greatest party you'll ever go to.
Awesome. Well, I've got so many things for my bucket list now. That's great.
Yeah.
And what I'll do as well, because there's a lot of names and places, I'll put these all in the show notes if anyone wants to find them written down or link to them. But yeah, as I said, I've got so many more topics, but I respect your time. Before we go today, where would you like to send people if they want to know more about you? I know you're very active on social media and stuff.
Yeah, so my Instagram handle is English on the Road. So if you hit that into Instagram, you'll find my Instagram page where I teach random expressions, idioms, whatever comes to mind. There's no real plan. I have a website called englishwithronan.com, and on there you can find my podcast. I also have a language learning podcast. And I guess between those two, they would be the main ones to go to. In the future, I'll have a lot more going on, but right now it's just the website and the Instagram page. So check those out, people.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. It's been really, really educational and fun for me, and hopefully everyone else as well. So thank you for joining me, and hope we can do it again soon.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks a million.
You have been listening to the Level Up English podcast. If you would like to leave a question to be answered on a future episode, then please go to levelupenglish.school/podcast. That's levelupenglish.school/podcast. And I'll answer your question on a future episode. Thanks for listening.